Stop for a moment, because if these words have reached you today, dismissing them as coincidence may be the one mistake you were never meant to make. You did not arrive here because of idle curiosity, and this moment was not assembled by chance. There has been an invisible sequence unfolding behind the scenes, quietly arranging circumstances until they led you to this exact point with remarkable precision. Before allowing your mind to rush ahead, become fully present for a single breath. Draw it in slowly, then release it with intention. Notice the atmosphere surrounding you, the thoughts moving through your mind, the sensations rising within your body. There is a reason your awareness has been guided here at this exact time. This Friday, July 3rd, is not simply another page turning on the calendar. It represents a crossing point, a boundary where one direction quietly gives way to another. And if you've always sensed that your life carries a purpose beyond what can be explained logically, then recognize where you are standing. You have reached a moment that separates one potential future from another. Perhaps for days, or even longer, you have noticed an invisible pressure building beneath your ordinary routines. Your thoughts may have refused to become quiet. Sleep may have felt unusually unsettled. Emotions that once stayed hidden may now rise without warning, while your intuition seems stronger than it has been in a very long time. It would be easy to mistake these experiences for confusion or emotional overload, yet that interpretation misses what is truly happening. What you have been feeling is not disorder. It is the unmistakable sensation of alignment beginning to take shape. Long before your conscious mind recognized this day, the universe had already begun preparing you for this very narrow window of time. Every experience, every delay, every unexpected feeling has quietly moved you toward this point. If something inside your heart has already responded to these words before your mind could analyze them, then trust that response. There is a part of you that recognizes truth before logic ever arrives. That quiet certainty is the reason you're still listening. These words are not intended for everyone who happens to encounter them. They are meant for those who are beginning to remember something they have carried within themselves all along. And if you feel that unmistakable recognition stirring inside you, then you already understand why you are drawn here today. There is something essential that deserves your complete attention because it has the power to transform the way you interpret every event unfolding around you. The choice you believe still lies somewhere ahead has, on a deeper level, already been made. It was never created by your fears, nor was it shaped by your doubts. It was established by the wiser part of your consciousness that exists beyond ordinary time, the version of you capable of seeing farther than your current perspective allows. Timelines are not chaotic streams appearing without order. They develop through alignment. They become increasingly solid until they eventually settle into place, and your own path has already begun that process. Think about the strange feeling that has followed you recently. The quiet certainty that something important is approaching, even though you cannot fully explain why. Consider the invisible pull drawing your attention toward a future you cannot yet see clearly. None of that is fantasy, and none of it exists only inside your imagination. It is the voice of your higher self gently guiding you toward the reality that reflects the person you are steadily becoming. There is another truth that many people resist because it requires them to release the comforting belief that every opportunity will wait forever. Certain moments arrive when countless possibilities narrow into one clear entrance. Those moments ask for presence instead of hesitation. If your intuition tells you that you are meant to walk this path, do not let this connection slip away into the noise of everyday life. Anchor your intention right now by subscribing to this channel. Consider it a conscious marker on your journey, a way to ensure we remain aligned as your true timeline continues to unfold. July 3rd carries exactly that kind of significance. The sensations you have been trying to interpret have likely been misunderstood. The weight resting in your chest, the urgency threading through your thoughts, the persistent awareness that something is preparing to change have never been warnings that everything is falling apart. They are signs that something within you is waking up. As a timeline begins settling into place, your entire energetic field responds. Your awareness becomes sharper. Your sensitivity increases. Every emotion becomes brighter. Every thought echoes more loudly than before. Suddenly, even the smallest inner dialogue appears impossible to ignore. This heightened intensity is not evidence that you are losing control. It is evidence that you are being recalibrated, The universe is carefully adjusting your inner frequency until it matches what is preparing to unfold around you. That process rarely feels comfortable because comfort has never been its purpose. Calibration stretches every part of you beyond familiar limitations. It asks you to release outdated patterns while preparing you for a reality your logical mind may not yet fully understand. This Friday does not resemble countless ordinary Fridays that have quietly passed throughout your life. It functions as a meeting point where your internal landscape and your external circumstances briefly move into unusual harmony. On most days, your attention becomes scattered among obligations, distractions, worries, and unfinished thoughts. Your energy leaks away without you even noticing. Your focus divides itself into countless directions. Yet during this particular window, something distinctly different begins to occur. Your concentration grows noticeably stronger. Your influence expands. The choices you make begin carrying greater consequences than they ordinarily would. It almost feels as though the universe temporarily shortens the distance between intention and manifestation, allowing what you believe, what you choose, and what you repeatedly think to ripple outward with extraordinary speed. That is why arriving here matters. Remaining unconscious during this period does not merely cause you to overlook an opportunity. It risks placing you onto a completely different path, one that no longer reflects the person struggling to emerge from within you. At this very moment, there are two possible versions of your future existing side by side. Although your physical eyes cannot fully perceive them, your spirit recognizes both. One future invites you to remain inside familiar habits, repeating comfortable patterns, choosing certainty over growth because it feels safer. The other future asks you to move forward despite uncertainty, to release those familiar patterns, and to enter experiences that may feel unknown but are deeply necessary for your evolution. Both realities remain available. Both carry genuine potential, yet only one ultimately becomes your lived experience. That outcome will not be selected through luck or coincidence. The direction becomes established within this very window, within these next 24 hours, not sometime next week, not next month, but now. This is the moment where possibilities separate into different roads. Whether your conscious mind fully understands it or not, you are already standing at the edge of that division, sensing the significance before the visible evidence appears. Perhaps beneath every intense emotion and every unanswered question, another quieter question has been waiting patiently. Why does all of this feel so deeply personal? Why does it seem as though these words are reaching directly into your own experience instead of speaking to a crowd? Why has this message awakened something that refuses to be ignored? The answer is remarkably simple, even though it carries tremendous depth. Most people move through moments like this without recognizing them. They continue through daily life, unaware that profound shifts are unfolding beneath the surface. They never notice when a timeline quietly changes direction. They overlook the subtle signals because their awareness remains elsewhere. You are different because you feel those invisible movements before they become obvious. You recognize changes before they fully reveal themselves. Your intuition senses transformation, while others still believe everything remains unchanged. That heightened awareness is not accidental. It serves as confirmation that you were meant to experience this turning point consciously rather than unconsciously. You were never brought here merely to witness events from a distance. You were brought here to make a choice, to become an active participant in what is unfolding, and to align yourself completely with the reality that is taking shape before your very eyes. Because what comes next depends upon the direction you're willing to embrace. If everything around you appears ordinary, do not assume that nothing important is happening. The clock continues its familiar rhythm. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon slowly gives way to evening, and life seems to move with the same predictable pace it always has. Yet beneath that ordinary appearance, another process has already begun unfolding beyond what your physical senses can easily detect. It does not announce itself with dramatic signs or unmistakable warnings. It does not demand attention through noise or chaos. Instead, it advances quietly, almost hidden beneath your conscious awareness, while a deeper part of you recognizes its presence long before your mind can explain it. That is why restlessness has become so difficult to ignore. There is a persistent feeling inside you that refuses to settle, an invisible nudge encouraging you to stay awake emotionally, to remain present mentally, and to resist slipping back into distraction. That sensation is not arriving without purpose. It is responding to the fact that this energetic window has already opened. Every passing moment carries you farther into it, and once this brief passage reaches its end, the reality you enter begins gathering a momentum that becomes increasingly difficult to redirect. This is not being revealed to frighten you or fill your thoughts with anxiety. It is being revealed because awareness changes everything. The next 24 hours are not simply another collection of ordinary moments passing through your schedule. They represent a period when your choices become unusually meaningful. What you decide, what you embrace, and what you release during this brief span will continue creating consequences that extend well beyond anything you can presently observe. Something powerful has been steadily increasing beneath the surface of your everyday experience. And whether you have attempted to ignore it or understand it, you have almost certainly felt its presence. It does not resemble the loud intensity the world often celebrates. Instead, it rises like an invisible current flowing beneath every thought, every emotion, and every instinct, quietly reshaping your inner landscape. This energy has not appeared without direction. It carries intention. It exists to elevate your frequency with remarkable precision, encouraging movement where stagnation once existed. Those unexpected flashes of crystal clear understanding. Those moments when everything suddenly seems obvious. Those impulses urging you to finally take action on something you have postponed again and again are not being created solely by ordinary thinking. They are moving through you from a deeper source. The universe communicates in many different ways, and words are only one of them. Often its language arrives as mounting pressure, unmistakable urgency, or an inner certainty that continues speaking no matter how many distractions attempt to silence it. Right now, that communication is stronger than it has been for quite some time. The real question is no longer whether the message exists because your spirit has already recognized it. The question is whether you will honor what you have already begun to feel. Somewhere within your life, there is something you have repeatedly postponed confronting. Deep inside yourself, you already recognize what it is, even if you have avoided giving it a name. Perhaps it is a decision that has lingered unfinished. Perhaps it is a truth you have resisted acknowledging. Perhaps it is an important realization that would permanently change your direction. Or perhaps it is an ending that your heart has quietly understood for far longer than your mind has been willing to admit. Whatever form it takes, it has continued following you. It appears in unexpected conversations, recurring thoughts, quiet moments of reflection, and subtle reminders that seem to return again and again. None of those appearances have been accidental. Whatever remains unaddressed does not simply disappear because it has been ignored. Instead, it waits patiently until the moment when avoiding it is no longer possible. During periods like this, when timelines begin settling into place, resistance itself becomes part of the path you create. If you continue refusing to face what already calls for your attention, you gradually align with a reality where that burden becomes heavier, more complicated, and increasingly difficult to leave behind. Yet if you choose to meet it directly, stepping toward it with courage instead of hesitation, the same obstacle begins transforming into forward movement. The weight that once held you back becomes the very force carrying you ahead. This is why avoidance no longer remains an emotionally neutral response. It becomes a decision that shapes what follows. You may also have sensed another unusual change without fully understanding its source. Time itself seems unfamiliar. Certain moments linger far longer than logic suggests they should, while entire stretches of the day seem to disappear almost instantly. The distance between your memories and your expectations feels strangely reduced, as though past and future are drawing closer together inside a single point of awareness. That experience is not simply a trick of the imagination. The ordinary structure that normally makes time appear steady and predictable begins becoming thinner during powerful periods of transformation. As significant energetic shifts unfold, time no longer feels entirely linear. It seems to fold inward, compressing itself while responding more directly to the quality of your awareness. That is precisely why these next 24 hours carry extraordinary importance. Their significance extends far beyond the events occurring inside them. Their influence reaches into everything that follows afterward. As time compresses, the impact of every aligned decision expands. One authentic choice can produce consequences that extend much farther than logic alone would ever predict. At this very moment, you are standing inside that rare compression where awareness and action become unusually connected. Pause for a moment and remember the weeks that led you here. Looking back now, you can probably recognize signs that once appeared too subtle to take seriously. Repeating patterns quietly emerged. Certain conversations carried an unusual emotional weight. Small experiences lingered in your thoughts much longer than expected, leaving impressions that refused to disappear. At the time, you may have dismissed those moments as coincidence, overthinking, or simple imagination. Yet today, they no longer feel isolated. Those same signals have grown stronger, clearer, and increasingly impossible to ignore. This is the way alignment gradually reveals itself. The universe rarely overwhelms anyone with every answer at once. Instead, it offers gentle indications first, allowing space for recognition to develop naturally. As pivotal moments approach, however, those indications begin gathering together. They reinforce one another until every sign points toward the same direction and the message becomes unmistakable. Nothing you are noticing now has suddenly appeared out of nowhere. It has been quietly guiding you for much longer than you realized, and now it is asking for your complete attention. Deep within you, there has always been a quiet inner voice that never depended upon external approval. It has never needed to compete with noise because its strength has always existed within certainty rather than volume. Yet trusting that voice has not always been easy. It does not argue with your fears. It does not force itself into your awareness. It simply continues knowing what your deeper truth has always been. Right now, that inner guidance has become stronger than it has been in a very long time. Your intuition is no longer functioning at its ordinary level. It has become amplified, cutting through uncertainty, fear, and the countless distractions surrounding you. You may recognize it as an unexpected feeling of certainty, a gentle but persistent pull toward a particular direction, or a sudden understanding that appears without any logical explanation. Instead of questioning every instinct, consider that your intuition may already recognize what your conscious mind has not yet accepted. During periods like this, it is not inventing possibilities. It is remembering the direction already established by the highest aspect of your own existence. Choosing to ignore that guidance now creates more than simple hesitation. It separates you from the deeper truth already trying to lead you forward. There is also a reason this entire period carries such unusual emotional intensity. The pressure you feel exists because not every part of your current identity is meant to continue into what comes next. Long-established habits, familiar behavioral patterns, old fears, and outdated identities are rising into your awareness because they have reached the end of their purpose. They cannot accompany you across this threshold. The version of yourself entering the next stage must become lighter, clearer, and more fully aligned with who you are becoming. Releasing what no longer belongs is therefore not a punishment. It is an essential part of transformation. Even so, transformation rarely feels comfortable while it is unfolding. It asks you to release familiar attachments even when those attachments no longer support your growth. This is where many people become trapped, attempting to carry every old belief, every old fear, and every outdated identity into a future that cannot sustain them. Yet something inside you already understands that this approach can no longer continue, not during this moment. Reflect once more on everything you have experienced leading up to today, every challenge, every delay, every period of uncertainty, every obstacle that tested your patience seemed at the time like unnecessary resistance. It may have appeared that life was preventing your progress or refusing to cooperate with your hopes. Yet standing here now, another perspective begins emerging. None of those experiences existed merely to hold you back. Each one quietly adjusted your perception, strengthened your awareness, and positioned you for the threshold now standing before you. They prepared you with remarkable precision because what lies ahead requires more than desire alone. It calls for a version of you that has become emotionally ready, spiritually aware, and fully willing to move without surrendering to hesitation. That version has not appeared through coincidence or random fortune. It has been carefully shaped through every experience that brought you here. Now the atmosphere surrounding your life feels unmistakably different. The change is no longer something waiting somewhere in the distance. It is no longer approaching from beyond the horizon. It has already arrived, drawing closer with every passing moment, inviting you to recognize that the reality you have been preparing for is no longer ahead of you, but unfolding around you now. There comes a moment, In every profound transformation, when possibility stops existing only as an idea and begins expressing itself as reality. That moment rarely announces its arrival with dramatic events or unmistakable signs that everyone can recognize. Instead, it enters almost silently, hidden inside ordinary hours, until one realization changes everything. You suddenly understand that returning to the person you once were is no longer possible. That is the place where you now stand. This narrow period before you is not asking for small adjustments or temporary corrections. It is asking for direction. Every decision made within this brief span carries lasting significance, because once a timeline settles into place, it no longer waits for additional approval before revealing its consequences. It simply begins unfolding according to the energy that has already been established. From that point forward, you either move in harmony with the path opening beneath you, or you experience the growing discomfort that comes from living out of rhythm with your own deeper purpose. If fear has become more noticeable recently, do not mistake its presence for a warning that you should stop. Look at it more carefully. Fear is not arriving to block your progress. It is appearing so you can finally see yourself clearly. It becomes strongest when you approach the outer edge of familiar experience, where growth asks you to leave behind the boundaries that once felt secure. This does not reveal weakness. It reveals transformation preparing to begin. The fear moving through you now is not inviting retreat. It is asking for commitment. It is quietly presenting a question that only you can answer. Will you continue following the part of yourself that keeps reaching backward toward familiar patterns, or will you trust the deeper voice that has been reminding you there is something greater waiting beyond everything you already know? True alignment has never required the complete disappearance of fear. Instead, it asks whether you are willing to continue moving even while fear remains present beside you. During moments like this, fear becomes a guide rather than an obstacle. It reflects the precise direction where your next stage of growth is waiting. In the beginning, the signs were gentle enough that dismissing them seemed easy. You could explain them away, postpone thinking about them, or convince yourself they were unimportant. Yet, something has changed. The signals no longer arrive quietly. They have become increasingly consistent, impossible to overlook, and much more persistent than before. You may notice the same thoughts returning repeatedly, no matter how often you attempt to replace them with something else. Certain ideas continue resurfacing with remarkable determination, refusing to disappear despite every effort to ignore them. Your body may also be speaking through an unmistakable restlessness that refuses to settle into comfort. None of this represents meaningless mental activity. It represents direction gradually becoming impossible to deny. The universe does not continue repeating the same message without purpose. Whenever something continues returning to your awareness again and again, it has moved beyond a gentle invitation. It has become a call that insists upon being acknowledged. Right now, that communication has reached a level where choosing not to recognize it carries consequences of its own. This is the final increase in intensity before the larger shift fully reveals itself. It is surprisingly easy to underestimate the influence of a single day. Most people assume that whatever they decide today can always be corrected later without meaningful consequence. Under ordinary circumstances, that assumption may appear reasonable. Yet this moment does not belong to ordinary circumstances. You are standing inside a period where time itself seems to gather inward, concentrating the influence of every action far beyond what would normally be expected. The decisions made throughout these next 24 hours will not remain confined within this brief period. Their effects continue extending into the weeks and months ahead, shaping experiences in ways your present perspective cannot yet completely recognize. This is precisely why conscious awareness matters so deeply now. Moving through this period without intention resembles beginning a journey while refusing to notice the direction of the road beneath your feet. Choosing instead to act with clarity, presence, and purpose is entirely different. It resembles stepping onto a path that begins opening naturally before you, building momentum with each aligned decision until progress becomes increasingly undeniable. That is the extraordinary influence one deeply aligned moment can carry. None of this exists to measure your worth or place you inside a test designed for failure. This moment is not about judgment, it is about observation and response. The universe continually interacts with energy, intention, and the choices created whenever opportunity or challenge appears. During this particular window, your responses carry unusual significance, not because some external force is evaluating you, but because every response contributes to your alignment. Each thought you repeatedly strengthen, every action you consciously choose, and every decision you embrace during this period sends a clear, energetic signal. That signal quietly determines which version of reality becomes your lived experience. Nothing here is simply happening around you while you remain a passive observer. Everything is unfolding through your participation. The universe does not stand separate from your choices. It responds to them immediately, continually adjusting the direction beneath your feet as each new decision creates another step forward. You have probably experienced periods when life seemed completely still, when progress appeared frozen, when uncertainty lingered so long that movement itself felt impossible. Then there are entirely different periods like the one unfolding now, when everything begins accelerating almost simultaneously. This is one of those rare activation windows. Dormant energy that has remained quietly preparing within you begins awakening with unmistakable strength. Gradually, confusion gives way to understanding. Indecision slowly transforms into direction. You may suddenly experience an overwhelming desire to begin something new, release something old, or finally move toward a future that has been waiting patiently for your arrival. Resist the temptation to dismiss this as simple impulsiveness. What you are feeling reaches much deeper than impulse. It is activation. The wiser part of yourself that has spent so much time observing, learning, and preparing is now stepping forward. Yet this invitation is not permanent. It exists for only a brief period, carrying remarkable precision and extraordinary intensity. That invitation exists now, and it is waiting for your response. Beneath every distracting thought, beneath every uncertainty, beneath every attempt to overanalyze what comes next, another voice continues waiting patiently. You have heard it before. It revealed itself during quiet moments when your mind finally became still, during unexpected flashes of understanding that arrived without explanation. That inner certainty has never disappeared. It has only become hidden beneath hesitation. Now it is beginning to rise once again with renewed strength. Somewhere inside yourself, you already recognize the direction you need to take. That knowing did not arrive because another person explained it to you. It was not created through endless analysis or careful comparison of every possible outcome. It exists because it resonates with the deepest part of who you truly are. This period is not asking you to search endlessly for answers somewhere outside yourself. It is asking whether you are finally willing to trust the answer that has quietly lived within you from the very beginning. As this powerful window continues unfolding, that certainty will not fade. It will become stronger, more focused, and increasingly impossible to deny. This stage of the journey brings every important emotion to the surface simultaneously. Confidence rises beside uncertainty. Courage stands next to hesitation. Clear vision appears alongside lingering fear. They do not emerge together to overwhelm you. They appear together because the final layer of resistance must become visible before it can be released. You may genuinely feel as though two different forces are pulling your life in opposite directions. One encourages movement toward the unknown future, already calling your name. The other urges you to remain inside everything familiar simply because familiarity feels safer. This is not inner disorder. It is the final internal crossroads before genuine alignment takes place. Here you are invited to decide which voice deserves your loyalty. The answer cannot be based upon comfort alone. It must be based upon truth. Genuine truth often asks for greater courage than comfort ever requires. Sometimes it asks you to release identities, expectations, or attachments you once believed were essential before you can fully become the person you were always meant to be. There is a remarkable weight surrounding this moment that refuses to disappear no matter how many distractions compete for your attention. Even when you attempt to focus elsewhere, your thoughts continue circling back to the same questions. Your awareness repeatedly guides you back into the present, because something essential is waiting to be acknowledged. That persistent return happens for a reason. The decision standing before you carries significance beyond ordinary emotion. It carries energetic consequence. What matters now is not only what happens immediately afterward, but the direction your life quietly begins following from this point forward, one aligned choice at a time. Every decision has the power to alter your direction, Yet there are rare decisions that reach far beyond an ordinary change in course. They create an internal realignment so profound that every part of your reality gradually begins adjusting itself around that single moment of choice. This is one of those moments. If the weight pressing against your heart feels stronger than usual, understand what it truly represents. It is not a burden designed to defeat you. It is the unmistakable signal that something deeply significant is asking you to awaken. Somewhere within you there is still an attachment that has quietly remained in place. It is familiar. It has accompanied you for a long time. At one stage of your life, it fulfilled an important purpose, helping you become the person you needed to be. Yet the path opening before you no longer matches what you continue carrying. Even if you have not fully admitted this to yourself, another part of you already knows it. You notice it whenever you hesitate before taking the next step. You recognize it in the subtle resistance that appears the moment you imagine moving beyond your current circumstances. That resistance is not appearing without reason. It is revealing exactly what can no longer continue with you. What you choose to carry into the future determines what the future is able to place into your hands. If your energy remains occupied by what has already completed its purpose, there is no room for the experiences, opportunities, and transformations attempting to enter your life. This has never been about losing something valuable. It has always been about creating the space necessary for something greater to arrive. What you willingly release during this brief period will directly shape everything you become capable of receiving during the next stage of your journey. For so long it may have seemed as though the opportunity you hoped for remained somewhere ahead, waiting beyond another delay or another season of preparation. Yet the truth is much closer than you imagined. The opening you have been sensing, the doorway you have been anticipating, the turning point you have quietly felt approaching has already arrived. It is standing before you now. Many people misunderstand moments like this because they assume meaningful opportunities remain available indefinitely. They believe they can return whenever they finally feel completely certain. Yet true doorways do not remain open forever. They appear with remarkable precision, existing only while your readiness, your awareness, and your willingness become aligned at the same time. That precise alignment is happening now. You can sense it in the atmosphere surrounding your life. Your awareness feels sharper. Your intuition speaks with greater confidence. There is an unmistakable feeling that something has become available today that did not exist before. Yet even the most extraordinary doorway changes nothing unless you choose to cross its threshold. Remaining where you are, endlessly analyzing every possibility or waiting for absolute certainty, only preserves the reality you already know. This is not an invitation to act recklessly or abandon wisdom. It is a reminder that hesitation also creates consequences. Those consequences are not punishments, nor are they evidence of failure. They simply direct you toward a different version of reality than the one currently calling your name. Every time you postpone what your deepest self already recognizes as necessary, you strengthen a timeline where that same decision gradually becomes heavier, more complicated, and emotionally more distant. Opportunities rarely disappear completely, but they evolve. Their appearance changes, their timing shifts, and they often become much more difficult to recognize once the original moment has passed. That is why this period deserves your complete attention. The direction before you has become unusually clear. The guidance reaching you has become unusually strong. The alignment supporting your next step is already present. During a moment like this, hesitation does not preserve your future. It quietly redirects it. Beyond this present uncertainty, there already exists another version of yourself. That future version is no longer trapped inside confusion. It is not standing still, questioning every possibility. It is not allowing fear to determine its next step. That version has already crossed the threshold waiting before you. It has already accepted the path that your heart is only beginning to recognize. At this very moment, that future self continues reaching back toward you, not through spoken language, but through emotion, instinct, and the quiet certainty that keeps returning no matter how often you try to silence it. That persistent pull is not fantasy. It is not wishful thinking. It is connection. The person you are becoming is already extending an invitation toward the life you are capable of living. Every intuitive feeling drawing you forward carries the echo of that future reality, encouraging you to trust what your spirit has understood long before your conscious mind could explain it. The only remaining question is whether you are willing to answer that invitation. This is the point where everything that has remained fluid begins becoming solid. The window continues narrowing. Countless possibilities slowly gather into one direction as the timeline settles into its final shape. Your physical eyes may not witness that process directly, yet every part of your inner awareness recognizes it. You feel it in the increasing intensity surrounding your thoughts. You feel it in the unusual clarity replacing old uncertainty. You feel it in the unmistakable sensation that something important is reaching completion. This movement cannot be paused simply because you are uncertain. It has already begun unfolding. As the timeline continues establishing itself, it quietly starts shaping the reality you will soon experience. That is why your awareness remains so valuable during these final moments. Although the larger process has already been set into motion, your relationship with it still depends upon the choices you make now. Your alignment remains yours to create. This is the final period during which your influence carries extraordinary power before the transition completes itself. There is no longer another season of waiting. There is no additional period of preparation before life begins changing. There is no reason to continue asking when the transformation will finally arrive. The shift you have sensed beneath the surface for so long is no longer approaching from somewhere in the distance. It is no longer a future possibility waiting beyond the horizon. It surrounds you now. Whether your logical mind fully accepts it or not, you are already standing inside it. This is the moment when everything that once existed only as potential begins expressing itself through reality. Energy begins becoming action. Possibility begins becoming direction. The heightened awareness moving through you, the unmistakable feeling that something irreversible has already begun, the quiet certainty that life will not continue exactly as it once did. None of these experiences are illusions created by an anxious mind. They are confirmation that you have crossed into the shift itself. From this point forward, the rhythm of your life begins gathering a new momentum, carrying you steadily toward the version of your future that your deepest choices are creating at this very moment. Let it support the version of you that is already unfolding. And if this message resonated with you, if you felt something activate within you, then anchor that energy right now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment the word "ready" to declare your alignment with this new timeline. Because this was not just a video you watched. This was a moment that found you. And moments like this do not come often. The next 24 hours are not just time passing. They are transformation in motion, and you chosen one are already stepping into.